In this video, we take a look at the beaded netting stitch. Stay with me and I'll show you how. Beaded netting is a very versatile stitch and it has lots of variations. You can have the lattice work on its own, or you can embellish it. And there are two styles, vertical netting and horizontal netting. The way the stitch is done is exactly the same, the only difference is the way the beads go. In vertical netting, the beads work up and down, and in horizontal netting, the beadwork goes from left to right and right to left. When we're coming to picking up our beads, in vertical netting, we pick up however many beads for however wide we want our piece. For example, if I wanted to make a bracelet with a width of 2 inches, I would pick up 2 inches worth of beads. For horizontal netting, we would pick up however many beads for however long we want our piece. So if I wanted to make a necklace of 14 inches, I would pick up 14 inches worth of beads. So let's get started. You will need seed beads and an accent bead. You can use seed beads of any size. And for your accent beads, you can use a bead of any size or any colour. You can use seed beads, or you can use crystals. For this example, I'm just going to be using seed beads. For my span beads, I'm using these 10-0 seed beads in gold. And for my accent beads, I'm using 8-0 seed beads in green. You'll also need a stopper bead. I threaded my needle with about an arm span of thread. First we take our stop bead and we slide it down to the end of our tail. You want to leave a tail of a few inches, long enough to sew in at the end. Then we sew back up through the bead, sewing in the same end the tail is coming out of, and we pull it through, and making a loop with the thread on the outside of the bead. This will be taken off later, it's just here to help prevent the other bead from falling off the end of the tail. Now we start picking up beads in sets, and a set consists of 1 accent bead and 2 span beads. So we keep picking these up, 1 accent and 2 span beads, and we pick up as many beads as we need until we reach our desired length or width. We want to make sure that we pick up an even number of sets. Here I have 8. We're going to start to sew back up along the row, and we're going to sew through the accent beads. But we're going to skip the first 3 accent beads and sew through the 4th one. And if we've done this right, we should have a loop with 3 accent beads and thus coming out of the 4th one. Now we pick up 2 span beads, an accent bead, and 2 span beads. We skip the first accent bead and we sew through the next one. We pick up 2 span beads, an accent bead, and 2 span beads. We skip the first accent bead and we sew through the next one. Now we're ready to begin our next row, and to start a row, we pick up 2 span beads, an accent bead, 2 span beads, an accent bead, and 2 span beads. This is the pattern we pick up at the start of every row. 2 spans, an accent, 2 spans, an accent, and 2 spans. From here it gets easier. We can see that along the row we have a dipped bead, a raised bead, a dipped bead, a raised bead, and so on. We skip this first dipped bead and we sew through this raised bead. And now for the rest of the row, we pick up 2 span beads, an accent bead, and 2 span beads. We skip this next dipped accent bead and we sew through this next raised accent bead. We pick up 2 span beads, an accent bead, 2 span beads. We skip this next accent bead and sew through the next one. And now we've reached the end of the row and we're going to begin another one. And to do this we pick up 2 span beads, an accent bead, 2 span beads, an accent bead and 2 span beads. We skip this first accent bead, sew through the next one. We pick up 2 spans, 1 accent and 2 spans. We skip the first accent bead and sew through the next one. Pick up 2 spans, an accent, 2 spans. Skip the first accent bead and sew through the next one. And to start our next row, we pick up 2 spans, an accent, 2 spans, an accent and 2 spans. We skip the first accent bead, sew through the next one. And for the rest of the row, pick up 2 spans, an accent and 2 spans. Skip the first accent bead, sew through the next one. Pick up 2 spans, an accent and 2 spans. Skip the first accent bead, sew through the next one. And to start a row, pick up 2 span beads, an accent, 2 spans, an accent bead and 2 span beads, and skip the first accent bead and sew through the next one. Carry on in that same pattern until you reach your desired length. You can also change up the number of beads between each accent bead to change the look of the netting. You can have 3 seed beads between each accent bead. You can have 4 seed beads between each accent bead, or 5. There's no limit to how many beads you can add. The more span beads you add between each accent bead, the wider the netting pattern. You can even increase the number of span beads with each row to give a graduated fanned out look to your pattern. This is a great look for short necklaces. If you want to, you can use crystals to embellish your piece, going through the accent beads. You can stitch them along the edge of the piece. You can do one edge or both edges. You can embellish a single row. You can even fill the entire lattice work with crystals. And that's how to do beaded netting.